Hello and welcome everyone to the latest installment of the Portent webinar series. My name is Colin Parker and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, Your Social Media Manager Needs Help, with Alex DeLeon, who leads our social media practice here at Portent. We'd love it if you'd all join in on this webinar. There are a couple of ways you can do that. One's by asking your question within the chat pane of GoToWebinar, and the other is by tweeting your questions using the hashtag PortentU. So that's hashtag PortentU. And just so you all know, in case you miss out on any of today's webinar or you want to review it later, don't worry. Tomorrow you'll get a follow-up email which will contain a link to this recorded webinar, a SlideShare link to the presentation slides, and a bit.ly link bundle which will contain all the links to the resources that Alex will be referencing in his webinar. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alex. Hey Alex.
Hey Colin, thanks for the introduction. And thank you everybody out there who's decided to attend today. Really appreciate it. Your social media manager needs help. We're going to take a look this morning at the impact paid social has had on the generalist approach to social media management. And I'm hopefully going to get you guys thinking about how to best utilize paid really to impact your business's bottom line. So a little bit more about me. As Colin said, I am the social media account manager at Portent. I lead our practice here at the agency. I support clients of every shape and size all across every single business practice you could possibly think of. I personally have been involved in social media for about 7 years. I've worked with tech industries, I've worked with sports teams, I've worked and helped video game companies launch. So I've been all over the place doing social media, and I brought that experience here to Portent to manage all of our clients here. So before we launch into this, let's talk a little bit about what makes a good social media manager. The role really has been around long enough where I think most of us know what a good social media manager is when we see one. More than anything, I think they're people who are tapped into all the social media platforms that are out there right now and can help really effectively communicate what's going on inside of a business or an organization to the external audience as well. For today's webinar, we're going to follow two social media managers kind of as a case study who really excel at what they do for their businesses, and their names are Sally and Peter. They're valuable in an organization because of a lot of different things. So they know how to do tactical posting and engagement with their users. They really excel at the customer service role. And they're really great, again, at following these social trends. These are the things really that make a social media manager effective at their job and have really since the role has taken off as something that's standard, in any business setting. For as long as Sally and Peter have been working in these roles, their success has come from a couple of different things. It's been rooted really strongly in virality and the strength of the copy that they write on a day-to-day basis. So they're great. They write engaging copy that goes out on Facebook, Twitter, any other platform. They know how to properly leverage their current followers to activate them, whether it's for a campaign or just a single post in a given day. They know how to write so that their audience wants to read what they're doing. And they're able to quickly pivot, change their approach on any given day so that they can shift with how social media is shifting or shift with how their audience is changing. And they're good at this. Like I said, the most good social media managers have this as part of their overall toolbox. So why are we here today? What are we doing in this webinar? Well, first I want to take a step back to 2012. That year, Facebook decided to restrict organic page reach. So any organization that had a page, they decided to cap overall reach to 16% of the audience that was contained within that. Really throwing a wrench into the free reach that a lot of organizations have enjoyed over the years as they built up their platforms. So, social media managers, I think, reacted accordingly. And you can see James Franco here is a little sad about that organic reach cap. Joking aside, this was huge. This was really, really big. Big brands weren't impacted as severely as the smaller brands were, really, but those smaller brands suddenly needed social to have a plan. They couldn't just go out there with content on a day-to-day basis. They needed to have it adhere to an overall communication plan because they were reaching such a smaller portion of the audience that they had enjoyed before. And social really just couldn't sit and fend for itself anymore. So what is reach capped at now? We're at 6.15% on Facebook. So basically, Facebook has told brands that organic growth isn't going to take place on any of their pages any longer. Twitter, for reference, is at about 30% a week. They measure it a little differently than Facebook does. And we're likely to see that drop moving forward as Twitter starts to engage paid social as a whole as well. So, it's 2012 was when that first happened. As you can imagine, we're well into the area of paid social. Almost every single social platform now that matters is pay to play. Virality, it's elusive now. It's hard to find within the social media platforms. Organic audience activation has been squelched. It's really hard organically to go out there and find your audience and activate them for anything short of something that, again, has gone viral, but that's hard to find again. So Sally and Peter's old playbook, the one that worked for them so well for years and years as they grew into these social media manager roles, really doesn't work anymore. It's resulting in dwindling metrics. Their audience reach is just shrinking, and they're really struggling to execute on any kind of campaign or strategy that they were able to successfully employ, all the way up to about 2012. So they both turned to paid social, along with everybody else. And I'm sure that includes a lot of folks who are in the webinar today. Last year in 2014, $16.1 billion was spent on social ads. And that's billion with a B. It's close to 10% of the overall spend last year, which was about $180 billion in advertising in the U.S. as a whole. And the takeaway here is that social no longer serves as an engagement driver without this paid element. No social media manager out there is finding any success, traditionally speaking, without diving into paid social. So what does paid social really mean? And I'm sure, again, a lot of you out there have already dove into this, used it on a day-to-day basis, seen what this is. But for those of you who are still assessing what paid social is and how to use it, we'll break it up into two different types. The first is paid promotion. So you're promoting typically a singular post, really common and straightforward. So if you have a post up on Facebook or you have a tweet out on Twitter, this is a bullhorn approach. It's saying this post, wherever you're putting it up, only reaches a certain portion of my audience, and I'm going to pay to unlock the rest of that audience. Again, really common, really straightforward. This is probably the easiest to understand paid social that is out there, and a lot of people use it without really digging too far into it beyond knowing that it's going to get them more access to more of their audience. The second type of paid social that we're going to talk about today is actually paid advertising. And if you dig a little deeper onto any of the main social platforms, you'll be able to find this. It's multifaceted. So you have tons of different approaches you can do on paid advertising. You can look at increasing your following. You can look at boosting a post to people that don't follow your page, and you can find them by demographics. And you typically enter this with end goals: website clicks, website traffic. Again, adding page followers or adding followers to your Twitter. Very, very targeted approach. So Sally and Peter, our case studies today, are going to look at two of these. They're each going to look at one of these. Sally's going to look at paid promotion here. She's unfamiliar with advertising. It's not something she's ever done before. And she wants to launch into promoted posts because she's seen it on Facebook. She knows it's really easy. She clicks a button. She puts money attached to it. She moves forward with it. Sally has a large page. She has about 500,000 followers already. She's getting steady growth. But the problem she's running into is that she wants to unlock reach to the rest of her followers. She's only reaching about 8% of her audience per post. No matter how well she writes the copy, she's not ever clearing that barrier. So she decides that she's going to spend about $120,000 over the course of the year on various promoted posts. So how does Sally track it? Sally's going to track her efforts in a spreadsheet. She's going to check her reach versus the spend that she's doing on each post. She's going to look at what she's getting in organic reach as she moves forward across the year versus what she's getting out of this paid promotion that she's doing. And she's going to track her total spend. And we'll come back to Sally a little bit later to see what she's done and what kind of results that she got. So Peter's going to pursue, unlike Sally, he's going to pursue a Twitter ad. He's done advertising in the past, one-off, so he's comfortable enough to go into this without knowing too much more other than he's going to be doing some very specific advertising through Twitter. Peter's problems are a little different than Sally's. he's been unable to drive major reach through his platforms for his organization because he only has 2,000 followers on Twitter. He's only reaching about 25% of that audience, and he's not growing at all. For whatever reason, his growth pattern is extremely slow. So he's also going to spend about $120,000 over the course of the year, but his is really going to be geared towards acquiring followers. While he spends time writing the copy and doing community management because he knows how to write copy, he's great at managing his community, he's just really struggling to get that community to grow. You can see below an example of what kind of campaign you would need to put together there. He's also going to track results similar to what Sally did. He's going to look at the total followers he gains over the course of the year versus how much he's having to spend to get that. He's also going to keep an eye on the growth rate each month, and he'll tweak his ads as he goes through to see better results. So he's going to know, just in his, from past experience, that if he's not seeing growth in one specific ad set, he's going to need to tweak the demographic it's going out to. Maybe he's going out to the wrong age group. Maybe he's going out to the wrong portion of the United States. Maybe he's posting stuff at the wrong time. He'll make changes in his ad set based on that kind of really topical knowledge that he's gained, either through his platform or just through anecdotal stuff that he's seen on his pages. He's also going to track his total spend as a whole. And you can see down below what a Twitter advertising campaign actually looks like on the Twitter platform. So let's go back and let's look and see what kind of results Sally and Peter got out of these first forays into paid social. So Sally earned about 100 million paid impressions at the end of the year versus about 1 million organic impressions that she gets. She didn't really see any significant growth in her organic reach over the course of the year. All of her reach was driven primarily by the money that she was putting into the platforms. And her new page likes went up slightly over the previous non-promoted period. So she's happy. She reached a lot more of her audience. And when she went back to her manager, she leaned into those results. She said, I got 100 million paid impressions, reached a lot more of our audience. We put the 120,000 towards that and accomplished the goal. We unlocked the audience with that money. Peter ended up, through his paid advertising campaign, with about 300,000 new followers on Twitter. He saw spikes in reach, not really any clear pattern, though, as to why those spikes happened. He attributed it mostly to the strength of the copy that he was writing or a particular time in the month that people are just more interested in being engaged. And he saw a slight boost in website traffic, according to the webmaster that he works with, who told him, hey, we had a lot more web traffic on a certain day, and Peter saw that as a correlation between the increased amount of followers that he got and the slight bump in reach that he enjoyed because of that. So now the question here is, should Sally and Peter be happy with these results? They're great numbers, right? Grumpy Cat's going to say no. He's going to say nope. Sally and Peter should not be happy with the results that they saw. So why? I mean, a lot of you out there are probably saying, hold up, those are great numbers. That's 100 million impressions over the course of the year. Peter saw 300,000 new followers. Those are great. I'd be happy to go to any one of my managers with those numbers. I would be happy to sit back and say, I accomplished a lot with $120,000 over the course of the year. You'd be right in a certain sense. Those are good numbers, at least qualitatively. But we can't just measure with a qualitative lens anymore. It doesn't work. It really just doesn't. And let's talk about why. For the longest time, social media managers used to pay for themselves. ROI in a business for social media was that social media manager. It was based on the strength of copy, how well they engaged with the audience. They essentially were the investment through their efforts, measured in likes and follows. And what an organization got out of paying that person's salary was engagement on social media, community management. But paid social now throws a wrench into that value proposition. Sally and Peter are marketers now. Results from social, they don't exist in a vacuum like they used to. You can't just write it off as the cost of doing business by hiring a social media manager. They're not just managing anymore. Sally and Peter have to pay now to reach their audience, and they have to provide really now just quantitative data to support the work that they're doing and the decisions that they're making on a day-to-day basis. So where did Sally and Peter fall short? I think a lot of you are probably wondering where I'm going with this. let's go back to the results. So qualitative observations, again, they're great. Great copy is also great, but they're only a part of the toolbox for today's social media manager. What was missing from Sally and Peter's results? It's quantitative results. Things like click-through rates, customer acquisition costs, the lifetime customer value. In short, again, they needed quantitative goals before they went into these campaigns, and they needed a way to measure them. And measuring quantitatively, these and many other distinctively unqualitative measurements that they've been doing, they're the kinds of data that support Sally and Peter's decisions around monetary spends if they're done quantitatively. Likes and impressions are still great as a baseline for success, but uncovering results that show growth in overall business goals are even better, and I would say necessary for any social media manager out there who's doing their work now in an environment where they have to spend the money. So, measuring success, we have new tools and ways to do this. On Facebook, what Sally could have done was dig into the insights portion of Facebook. She could have looked and gone down to post-level data. It's highlighted here in this post, which basically is highlighting in a single post that she's promoting how much engagement is she seeing. She needs to dig into things like that. Engagement rate in the Facebook Insights tab over several months will help her better support the money that she's spending on a day-to-day basis. And so social media managers today need to be comfortable working in things like Excel, which can be a stretch for a lot of them because they've never done it before. But as you can see towards the bottom of the slide, if you squint really hard, you'll see things like lifetime post total reach, which is basically saying, great, you got 300,000 engagements or even just impressions on one post, but what did that mean? When did they do it? How did they do it? Where were they going? What were they doing when they were engaging with it? This would have let Sally understand a little bit better where her money was going, how she was spending it, and she could tweak her approach moving forward to, if she was seeing something she wanted, she could better embrace that and lean into it with the money that she was spending. So, you also, moving forward now, social media managers need to assess the value of third-party tools. The graph on top here is something that you can see from a group called Simply Measured, one of the more richer offerings from third-party social media measures out there. Really just, you need to dig really deep, find robust data. Also, social media managers need to use things like Google Analytics. You can see down there below. What Google Analytics lets social media managers do is really look and see how they're impacting website traffic, which for many social media managers is going to be one of the bottom lines they need to drive. Acquiring leads on their website pages is probably one of the most critical things a social media manager can do nowadays. So I think a lot of social media managers probably have a lot of feelings right now. Don't eat them. Don't be Emma Stone. Don't eat your feelings. We can work through these. It can be a little overwhelming now to think what you were doing, qualitatively for the longest time now needs to be measured quantitatively through tools that you might not know a lot about and you might not completely understand. Don't panic though. Deep breath. Sally and Peter, really, they're not abandoning their old skills. They're still the foundation of what they do on a day-to-day basis. There just needs to be more now. Social media, if it ever really did in the first place, doesn't operate independently of other business functions. So while those old skills are now required, measurement and reporting are now going to have to become the norm in the social media manager's toolbox. And more reason now than ever because they're starting to spend money to provide provide and evaluate success indicators. A lot of you out there probably are familiar with terms like Kpis, key performance indicators. These are things that before any kind of campaigns are embarked upon, really need to dive into, better understand, so that at the end of the day, when you're going to a manager or a director, what have you, and saying, I spent $120,000 of your money, you come back and say, and here's why. Here are the key performance indicators that I hit. Here's how I delivered value to the company. Here's what I did with that money that resulted in positive growth or even negative growth in the business bottom line so that we can make better decisions through social as a whole. So what's next? The new Sally and Peter, really, they're more social media marketer now than they are manager. And that's an understanding, I think, that's kind of slow to come around. What do you do? What does Sally and Peter do next? now that they're marketers, where do they go? Well, as you might imagine, the first thing that you can do as a social media manager, if you're working internally, is embrace and integrate with your marketing team. These folks have, for years and years and years, been doing the kinds of things that social media managers now need to do, in their own efforts. They need to better measure how they're spending money so they can figure out how it impacts the bottom line. So if you have a marketing team internally, or you have a resource that functions the same way, work with them, integrate with them, figure out how social media can integrate with the efforts that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Again, so that social media doesn't exist in a vacuum in your company that isn't integrating well with other business components. The second thing that they can do, and like Colin said at the beginning of this webinar, I'll be providing a set of links to do this, is learn these measurement skills online. For the most part, a lot of what a social media manager needs to understand is available out there if you want to take the time to sit down and really understand it. Things like PPC learnings, and that's what predominantly this Bitly bundle is going to cover. All those terms I covered earlier: click-through rate, customer acquisition rate. How do you calculate those? Where do you get that kind of information? What kind of data do I need to acquire from the stuff that I'm doing on social to really pull those numbers out? This can all be learned online. Just got to sit down, really devote the time to it, and really switch, in your head, you're thinking around, I'm not just curating posts anymore, but I'm actually need to find an effective way to measure the ROI for those posts. And that can all be done on your own online pretty effectively. And lastly, this is a little shout out obviously to myself at Portent, but outsourcing these to an agency, these kinds of measurements, can be a really effective way to take this load off of you so that you can really focus on what you're good at. If you're strong at content curation, copywriting, and you're still learning the more involved and intricate ways to measure your success, agencies know how to do this. They're really good at it. They are an excellent resource for any external organization to really better understand what are they doing online and how is it impacting their customers or their followers, and how can they do it better through, again, quantitative measurement. Agencies are excellent at providing these resources, and I would highly encourage anybody out there who is struggling with these concepts to at least look in to see if maybe there's a one-off project an agency can help you with to really better understand how you can deliver more, better and more effectively deliver results on social media. So, that is it. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of this. And with the time we have remaining, we're going to do some Q&A. And I think Colin has been monitoring our social media channels, and we'll take a look at webinar, GoToWebinar here. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, if anything we talked about in this webinar struck you and you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, definitely shoot us a message on Twitter right now. Feel free to type a message here and GoToWebinar, and we're happy to answer it.
Thank you, Alex. That was extremely informative. So now don't forget, all the resources that Alex referenced are going to be available via the Bitly link bundle, which you can find here. And remember that the Bitly link bundles are case sensitive when you're typing that in. So going to some of the questions that we got via GoToMeeting, John asks, if paid is a requisite for engaging your followers and fans on Facebook, should you be pushing your audiences aggressively towards your website for an email sign-up?
It's a great question. So the answer is going to be yes in that specific instance. And I think, again, what social media managers haven't had to do in the past and what they're needing to do now is really evaluate before they start any kind of campaign or look at what they're doing on Facebook or Twitter. Really establish goals and get a KPI set up so that you can understand at the end of the day, if you're doing something on social, what am I getting out of it? So going back to this question, should I be pushing folks through social to sign them up on email on my website? Absolutely. I think that that's a really effective way at the end of the day. If you're putting a messaging out on social that's seeking to drive longer term engagement with customers, measuring how many of those folks you can get through social to sign up on an email, it's a great way to measure how well you're doing on social as a whole, and it's going to obtain for you longer term customers in the long run anyway, because they're going to be engaging with you through your emails, over the course of time.
That's great. And I think John's question begs an interesting follow-up, which would be, are there reasons why you really wouldn't want to drive folks towards an owned email list where you would want to leave them in Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, if you're on your social channels and you're driving folks to engage with you longer term, I think any social media out there worth their salt understands that only so much of what you do on social can be pushing your followers or customers into a sales channel. Social, for to do it really effectively, needs to come off as not just organic but sincere. And if you're pushing folks towards sales channels, they're going to recognize it pretty quickly. So you have to be selective about how you go about doing that. If you feel like your other campaigns are coming off as salesy enough, then you would definitely want to lean away from pushing them towards email lists, so that you don't come off as too pushy, too salesy. So yeah, that's one reason among others. But again, another reason would be if your social channels are purely about customer engagement anyway, and you haven't ever done any kind of push towards something more salesy, it might turn off your activated audience. So those are the kind of things you have to evaluate going into that kind of decision. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, next question from Steve G. Do you see Twitter getting more aggressive with a push towards requiring paid contribution or advertising? How do you think that might show up?
Yeah, so taking a step back and looking at what Twitter's done as a whole, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, Twitter's only at about 30% restriction per week. Much better, I think, if you were to compare it to Facebook. The Twitter CEO has come out and said that by 2022, they want to have their revenue increased tenfold. So they're at about 1.4 million right now 14 million per year. They want to be at like 140 million, I think, a year by 2022. They're going to get there one way, and it's going to be by leveraging paid social. And to do that, they're going to likely follow the same model Facebook did to force organizations and brands to pay, which is restricting the organic reach you get through Twitter. So yes, Twitter will be very aggressively, I would imagine, in the very near future, moving towards a paid model. They already are. Their advertising systems are very robust. If you ever have the opportunity to look into it, you can see that you can drill down so far as to say, I only want to advertise to certain cell network providers in the United States. They're that detailed. So the platform to really push paid is in place, and I think you're very likely to start seeing it in the very near future.
Very interesting. We're definitely going to be watching that, and we'll probably end up talking about that in a future webinar. Okay, so from Jenny Z, is there a way to estimate how much a business would need to spend to keep a Facebook audience engaged if it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 followers today?
Yes, it's difficult right now because, and this is taking another step back and looking at what we can get out of social. So while marketers have for a long time been able to provide dollar-to-dollar results for their efforts, social's not quite there yet. We can't definitively say that we're going to be able to put in $10,000 and get $20,000 out of it. But if you're looking in terms of how do I determine what I should spend for one audience versus another, common sense says that the larger your audience is, the more money you're going to have to pay to activate them and reach them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you're looking into your Facebook Insights tab and you're seeing what your audience is comprised of, where they are, what they're doing, how they're doing it, that kind of insight can tell you who do I want to actually reach, so that when you're going out and promoting posts, you have 10,000 followers. Let's say only 3,000 of them are active followers, but your reach is being restricted to about 300 of them. You wouldn't want to pay to unlock all 10,000 of your followers. It wouldn't make any sense. 7,000 of those folks aren't actively following your brand anyway. And if you want to reactivate them, that's an entirely new campaign you have to look into, on your own, establish KPIs. If you're purely just saying, how much money should I be spending, in a one-off sense to activate another portion of my audience, find those insights, find out who is actively listening to you and why, and then find out how many of them you actually have as part of your overall audience makeup, and go after those folks, because you can do that. You can drill down that detailed so that the money that you're spending is both selective and you'll get a better idea through Facebook when it'll tell you how much money you need to spend to unlock a certain amount of your audience or a certain subset. You can make your decisions based off of that.
That's great. Okay, Alfred asks, are there things you can do in organic social that would diminish your need for paid? I've heard that your reach can change based on how well you're engaging your audience.
Absolutely. So if there's anybody out there, we'd love to hear from you, first of all. If there's anybody out there who has a large audience on Facebook and is wondering, I don't see 6% restriction on my Facebook page. I'm hitting, I have 100,000 followers and I'm getting, 6,000 to 7,000, reach for each of my posts. It does happen. So some of it is external factors. So if you're doing a knockout job on your website presence, you're showing up in SEO results significantly higher than your competitors. You're doing something on another channel. Let's say you're looking on Facebook, but you're also active on Twitter and YouTube. All of these things can contribute to significantly higher percentage of outreach for your overall base than you would see purely based on what we've seen in this webinar. So that 6% restriction is heavily hits folks who aren't engaging very well on Facebook. So yeah, if you have a Facebook page of 10,000 people, 100,000 people, and you're regularly reaching higher than that 6%, it can be done organically. You just have to have great copy. You have to have a great presence on your Facebook page, and you really, really have to have an understanding, and good social media managers have this, of what your audience is looking for as a whole anyway. And that does impact reach without having to go into paid. But, like we mentioned in this broadcast, for those of us who are operating in these channels and are doing so without a brand like Nike behind us or without a brand like Adidas behind us, it's tough. It is really hard to significantly impact your organic reach without having active avenues in marketing or anything else. So I hope that answers that question. It is involved. It is a lot more involved than that, but I think that'll give folks a good idea of exactly how your organic reach can rise and fall without having to jump fully into paid.
So we've got another question here that I think would be good to unpack. So Luddite asks if we could please explain organic reach.
Sure, yeah, and that's probably something that can speak a little bit closer to what I just said. So when we're saying organic reach, give you a really great example here. So Portent has roughly about 8,000 followers on Facebook, and when I post a post to our Portent page, our reach for that singular post, without putting any money behind it, anywhere between 300 people to 1,000 people if the copy is written really well and is received well. That's my organic reach. That's how many people I can reach without putting any money behind anything that I'm doing. That's how much of my audience I can reach. That's what organic reach is. Versus paid reach, which is essentially saying I have on Portent 8,000 followers and I'm only unlocking X amount organically, but I know I want to reach the rest of them. I'm going to pay $1,000 so that I can unlock up to about 3,000 or 4,000 of my followers that I have so that they all see it. That's paid reach versus organic.
That's great. David P. asks, ultimately, isn't the keyword here social? And people don't want marketing messages while they're on social platforms. So it's just interruption marketing to do social media marketing.
I think that's a really, really great observation. We're at a crossroads right now, essentially. So for up until about, again, 2012, 2013, what you saw happening on social media across all platforms, Facebook, Twitter, I don't know if Instagram was quite where it is right now back then, Google Plus for those few people who actually use it. What was happening on those channels was organic and really well resonating messages that brands or organizations or singular people were doing solely because other people wanted to hear it. They weren't pushing products heavily. Big brands obviously were, but most folks weren't. And what you saw was stuff going quote unquote viral pretty often. If you think back to 2009 through 2011, we had stuff going viral probably 4 to 5 times every 6 months. Something would get big. Think back over the last year or two, how much stuff has gone viral. I can think of the Ice Bucket Challenge, and then maybe stuff that Kim Kardashian does, right? virality as a whole is disappearing exactly because of what David just asked here. Social is shifting away from the stuff that resonates well with people because they want to discuss it, and moving more towards this marketing channel. And yeah, interruption marketing, I think, is a great way to think about it. We now have millions of people on social because that they got there because of what happened in the past, but they're there anyway. Brands are going to be leveraging social to market to people, and they should be, because there's millions of them out there. A lot of people would see this, I guess, as an unfortunate, evolution of social media. It just, to me, it is what it is. We have to use it like it is. You can still use it to reach organically those folks and really resonate with them if you do it well. But this is a marketing channel now. All of them are, and they should really be embraced, I think, is that way.
Outstanding. And then final question, I think, unless we get a couple others, could you clarify the difference between paid promotion and paid advertising? For example, the benefits and drawbacks of each.
Sure. And this is Kelly. The difference between paid promotion and paid advertising is this. Paid promotion can be, you can log on right now, go promote your, post, your page, what have you, without really digging too deeply into the people that you're hitting. Facebook and Twitter both now have made it easy to just give you a bullhorn and shout what you're saying on social media. So, and what I mean by that is exactly what I spoke to a little earlier. Basically important, say I put a post up on Facebook, and I know I can only hit about 300 people. I'm going to do paid promotion of that post to reach more of my audience. I'm going to get closer to the 8,000 followers I have by doing paid promotion. Paid advertising, what's the difference? The difference is that when you put together an ad campaign, it's going to be longer. It's going to be multiple days. Typically, it could run into weeks. It should have some key performance indicators attached to it. You should have some very definite goals that you're working towards with these social media advertising campaigns. And you're going to be putting typically a lot more money into it. And it's going to have, again, specific goals. So in the webinar, what we talked about was Peter went and did a Twitter paid advertising campaign. So instead of promoting one of his tweets so that more of his followers saw it, or friends of his followers saw it, his end goal, his KPI here, was increasing the amount of followers that he had on his page as a whole, so that at the end of the day he could have more reach. That was a year-long effort versus what Sally was doing in the paid promotion area. She was simply putting posts up that had strong copy, and she was putting money behind each of those posts so that her already large following could hear, more of them would hear about it. If you dig into paid advertising, what you'll see is, again, several different goals. You can go for website clicks, so you can drive traffic to your website. You can go for increasing your following. You can go for video activations. So if you have a video on any of your social pages, you can put money behind that over the course of several months. You can do traditional in the most in the most common sense of the word. So basically, you can put together some marketing collateral. It would have really nothing to do with your Facebook page as a whole, though it could have some corollaries, association with it. And it would be collateral that would be designed to sell a product. And sure, your name on Facebook would be attached to it, but it would be just like the ads you see when you're going out there and searching on Google, and getting driven to products to buy. It's similar in nature to that. So that is in somewhat of a nutshell the difference between paid promotion and paid advertising. Definitely encourage you to read into more about the differences between the two, because for social media managers, using paid promotion can be a really effective one-off short-term strategy for boosting your page's reach. Paid advertising is going to have much longer-term impacts on your business as a whole, and you're probably going to spend more money, so you're going to have to focus really heavily on getting those goals and KPIs put together. So I'm seeing from Mark Rose that he's having trouble accessing the bit.ly link.
And guys, I'll speak to that really quickly. It's just a quick font issue to correct. At the end of the bit.ly URL, that's /1 as opposed to /I or /L. So that's /1. And remember, you're going to get this in an email follow-up to the webinar, but if you absolutely can't wait, and I don't blame you, that's the bit.ly as it appears with a /1 at the end. And guys, unless we have any other questions, I think we'll probably wrap it up there. You guys have asked some absolutely fantastic questions. We really appreciate it. Feel free to tweet at Alex anytime. He also monitors our @Portent social profile, but you can reach him on his personal profile, which is...
Yeah, I'll go back here to the very beginning real quick. It's @Alex_Deleon. And that is Alex, spelled normally, _DELEON. I'll see if I can get back to the beginning of this. You guys can all take a look at it and follow me on Twitter.
Outstanding. Well, guys, thanks again. We'll bring this up. We'll leave that on the screen for just a minute. Oh, and propriety dictates that we probably should issue our correction now. That is, in fact, not James Franco. That is James Vanderbeek, a.k.a. the Dawson. How could any social media manager ever hope to keep all of the Jameses straight?
Too many of them.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thank you very much. Be sure to join us next month for our next webinar, which is going to be on how to create a successful international SEO strategy with our own Caitlin McMichael, who is Portent's resident international SEO expert. Remember, if you don't want to wait to sign up, you can go to the Portent website right now, or you can go to the webinar tab on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/portent.marketing. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.